please welcome to the stage Dominic Frisby.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome to Panmure House, the home of Adam Smith. Some of you may not know Adam Smith, but it's said that he was to economics what Darwin was to biology and what Newton was to physics. And this is the very room in which he completed his masterpiece, Wealth of Nations. And I suppose the very first question we should ask is, how did gold come into existence? How is gold made? And there are all sorts of theories about this. One of them is divine creation. And there is divine creation as imagined by artificial intelligence. I use a lot of AI art in this show, an app called Midjourney. Plato and Aristotle both thought that you can make gold by mixing sunlight with water. And there are Plato and Aristotle in the pub discussing this issue. For some reason, Plato has both pints of beer while Aristotle has none, and he's not looking too happy about it. And interestingly, Aristotle also has 6 fingers. Midjourney isn't very good at doing hands yet. The Incas and the Aztecs and the Mayans of Central and South America used to think that gold is the sweat of the sun or the tears of the sun. And they were very interested in cosmology, these cultures, and they thought that gold was the link between humanity and the cosmos, and therefore it held great importance in their folklore. Meanwhile, in Europe, alchemists thought that you could make gold from base metals, and there is one of the most famous alchemists. Anyone know who that is? Isaac Newton, absolutely right. As well as his contributions to optics and physics and mathematics, he actually dedicated more of his time to alchemy, leading Keynes to describe him as not the first of the age of reason, but the last of the magicians. And Newton actually thought he'd cracked it. He thought he'd found the philosopher's stone, how to turn base metals into gold. And he wrote that he'd cracked it. And then he realised that he hadn't. And he went into a Great Depression. And it's not known if it was his failure to create gold that caused the Great Depression or the mercury that he was trying to make the gold out of. Probably a bit of both. And of course, Isaac Newton later in his career would go on to be Warden of the Mint and then Master of the Mint. Today we'd call that Governor of the Bank of England. And he was the man who put Britain officially on the gold standard in 1716. But today it is generally agreed that gold is made in outer space. When neutron stars collide, the resulting nuclear explosions create gold and other heavy metals, heavy elements, and then the explosions disperse those elements into space. And in 2017, scientists actually thought they saw gold being created millions of light years away, and they were able to measure just how much heavy elements were created, just how much material was created because of the reflection of the gold in the sun and the starlight. So perhaps the Incas weren't so wrong to say that gold is the tears of the sun. And it's thought that our own solar system was created from just one such collision thousands of billions of years ago, and thus that gold was present in the dust which formed the solar system. And then that dust, gravitational pressure, pushed that dust together through a process known as accretion. Meteors collided, all compressed together, and so were the planets gradually formed. And so did gold make its way into the Earth's crust, which is, a little statistic for you, 1 part per million gold. Now, park that thought as we turn our attention to a Danish metal detectorist by the unfortunate name of Ole Ginnerup Scheitz. And Scheitz had the most tremendous stroke of beginner's luck. On his very first day with a metal detector 3 or 4 years ago, he found 2 pounds of Viking gold, 1,500 years old, in a field near Jelling in Denmark. 22 pieces. And that gold was exactly as it was when it was buried 1,500 years ago. Some of it had been bashed about a little bit, but apart from that, there you can see just how well preserved that gold was. This is a tooth bridge which sits in a museum in Cairo, and it's 4,500 years old. And you can see that those teeth may not be what they were, but the gold itself, again, is exactly as it was when it was put in that rich Egyptian's mouth all that time ago. And that is because gold is inert. It doesn't react with anything. It doesn't rust, it doesn't tarnish, it doesn't corrode, it doesn't decay, and it never loses its shine. And with that in mind, I'm going to pass around 2 gold coins around the room. I'm going to pass them to you, sir, first, and madam, I'm going to hold you responsible for their safe return. And they've lasted the entire festival, so I'm determined they last one more day. I'll just tell you a little bit about them. This gold coin here, it's about maybe an eighth of an ounce, about 4 grams, and it was minted in 602 AD in Byzantium. It's a Byzantine solidus. And you may have heard Shakespeare and other writers refer to bezants. This would be a bezant, and it was the sort of foundation coin of the of the Byzantine Empire all through the Dark Ages until about 1200 AD. And it's pretty much pure gold, 24 karat gold. You can see how shiny it is. If you hold it up to the light, it catches the light. And as you hold it, just feel, even though it's very light, you can still feel how dense it is, and allow yourself to gaze at it and be compelled by it. And here also is a Victorian sovereign. It would be about 150 years old, not as shiny as the bezant because it's not as pure. The sovereigns were only 22 karat gold. They mixed them with copper to make them that little bit more hard, that little bit harder. And this was the old pound coin. And today it takes 400 pound coins to buy the old pound coin, such as money being debased. But anyway, I'll pass them to you, sir, and admire them, and then pass them on. Now, you might remember the trope of many a movie that pirates would bite gold to test its purity. And the reason for that is that gold is extremely, it's tasteless, so that you can't taste if it's pure. But pure gold, if you bite it in the clamp that is your mouth, and the jaw is one of the strongest muscles in the body, you would be able to bend it slightly if it was pure gold. And that's what they're testing for. If it bent slightly, they'd know that gold was pure. And gold is extremely malleable. You can beat it into a leaf that's just 1 atom thick. You can stretch an ounce of gold into a wire 5 miles long. But there is one thing you cannot do, and that is destroy it. As a certain band so famously sang, gold is indestructible, and no other substance on earth is as durable. Not diamonds, not tungsten carbide, not boron nitrate, and even tiny specks of gold dust are permanent. Now, if gold, the only way you can destroy gold is nuclear explosions, or you can dissolve it in acid. But then you can still recover it from that acid afterwards. And if gold, therefore, is indestructible, and gold was present in the dust which formed the solar system, that therefore means that that little bit of gold that you might be passing around the room now, or you might have on your finger or round your neck, is not just older than the Earth itself, it is older than the solar system. And therefore, to touch that gold, to handle that gold, is probably the closest you will ever come to touching eternity. How about that for a profound thought? And I typed that prompt into Midjourney, to touch gold is to touch eternity, and it came back with this magnificent image. Why it felt the need to display such a prominent cleavage, I have I have absolutely no idea. I think it had something to do with incels in Silicon Valley or something like that. But in any case, a lady actually came up to me after the show a few days ago, and she complained about all the AI art that I was using. She said I should use work by real artists. But there are maybe 65 slides in this show. If I was to commission 65 pictures and all the back and forth and all the rest of it, I just don't have the resources, I don't have the money, I don't have the man hours, but I can come up with images like this, even if she has 6 fingers, in just 30 seconds. And that's what the incredible thing about, I get the whole AI art's putting graphic designers and artists out of business. I'm a writer. I get the fact that ChatGPT is going to put me out of business or change the nature of my work. But I also get that it makes these things widely and cheaply available. So I get both sides of the argument. But gold has always had this association with the eternal, with the gods, with the sun. And I mentioned the Aztecs before, that gold was the link between humanity and the cosmos. The Egyptians thought the same. They would bury their leaders, their pharaohs, with gold in order to give them safe passage into the afterlife. And I typed that into Midjourney. Gold gives you safe passage into the afterlife. And it came back with this sort of Hieronymus Bosch-like image. And also, we always associate gold with things that are good. Gold star, heart of gold, a golden thread. That comes from the legend of Theseus and the Minotaur, the golden thread that guided him through the labyrinth. And if somebody has a golden thread, they're on a good path in life. The gold standard, it's always associated with things that are good, except gold digger. But if gold is indestructible, that therefore means that all the gold that has ever been mined or found in history still exists. And statisticians have calculated that amounts to roughly 210,000 tons of gold. And you could fit all that gold into a bit bigger than an Olympic swimming pool. And, or you could fit it into the space underneath the Eiffel Tower. And I find it incredible that that's all the gold. It gives you an idea of just how rare gold is. It's rarer than diamonds. All the gold is still only fits into that small space. But at the same time, there's a big philosophical difference between natural law, the laws of nature, and positive law, the laws of man. And natural law advocates, the physiocrats, would argue that gold is natural money. And that is because new gold mine supply increases at exactly the same rate as population growth. So there's roughly as much gold per capita now as there always has been. In fact, there's a tiny bit more. But this link between gold supply and population growth means it's a natural form of money. And 80% of the world's gold has been mined in the last 100 years or so. And it's thought that between 20 and 40% of all the gold that's ever been mined was mined in one reef in South Africa, the Vitzvatas Reef. That was the discovery around which Johannesburg, the city of Johannesburg, sprung up. And it was discovered in 1886 by a mining prospector by the name of George Harrison. And if there is a worse deal, it's just a 60-mile long reef, 2 miles deep. It was probably a meteor that struck the Earth at some point. But if there is a worse deal that has ever been done in history, I would like to know what it is. In 1886, he discovered this reef, and he sold this reef that would produce, let's say, a quarter of all the gold ever mined. He sold his discovery for £10. That's even worse than Decca turning down his namesake 50 or 70 years later. And so I've extolled the virtues of gold, I've enthused about gold, but Warren Buffett was never a fan, and if bank balances are anything to go by, he's considerably brighter than I am. And his dad, by the way, was a massive gold bug, a massive sound money advocate. Howard Buffett was his name, and he was a big critic of Roosevelt and argued for sound money in the 1930s and so on. But he said it gets dug out of the ground in Africa or someplace, then we melt it down, dig another hole, bury it again, and pay people to stand round guarding it. It has no utility. Anyone watching from Mars would be scratching their head. Gold has no utility. We don't use it to construct things. We don't use it to cut things. We barely use it to conduct things. It does conduct electricity, but silver and copper are both better and cheaper. Gold's industrial use is minimal. There's a tiny bit in mobile phones, but it's used not to conduct the electricity, but to coat the copper and silver to protect it. Funnily enough, one of gold's largest industrial applications is actually in outer space at the final frontier. And that is, it's used to, for example, reflect astronauts' visors and to coat spacecraft because of the fact that it's permanent. But as Paleolithic man, as Stone Age man hunted and gathered thousands of years ago, he would have come across 6 metals, the 6 native metals that appear in nature in a relatively pure state. And in fact, we only knew of 7 metals until the 13th century. It's only after the 13th century that we discovered the other 90 or so metals. And each metal had a day of the week associated with it. Today is Sunday, gold's day, Monday, silver. And each also had a celestial body, gold, of course, the sun. And mankind would have found alluvial gold, gold nuggets in riverbeds. And he would have been perhaps crossing a river and he would have seen the gold glistening and it would have caught his eye. And that's an example of a gold nugget. That's actually the largest gold nugget ever discovered in Scotland, 3 ounces of gold. It was discovered about 12 years ago. It's since been deep fried. But human beings would no doubt have been compelled by this beautiful substance as they discovered it. And if you ask the internet will tell you that the very first metal we used is copper. We used copper pendants. There's a copper pendant that dates back nearly 9,000 years. And of course, we used copper tools. In the Bronze Age, which began about 3,500 years before Christ, that's when we discovered smelting and we mixed copper and tin. But copper tools predate the Bronze Age. But there are Paleolithic caves in Spain that we know were inhabited 40,000 years ago. And fragments of gold that have clearly been shaped by human hands have been found in those caves. And that means, therefore, that human beings were using gold tens of thousands of years before we used any other metal. But it has no use, it has no utility. So what were we using it for? The same thing we use it for today. We wore it. We used it to display beauty, to attract people, to display accomplishment, success, status, reproductive prowess. Look at me, I have access to this shiny substance. We almost certainly used it as a tool of barter as well, as an expression of reward, an expression of gratitude, as prize. In the same way we give out a gold medal or a gold star today, we would have given gold as reward. In other words, we were using it as very primitive money. But if gold is the first metal we ever used, and we've been using it for thousands, tens of thousands of years, and we were transfixed by it even back then, perhaps we have an instinct for gold. We certainly have an instinct for beauty. But as I say, gold's only use is to... Fortunately, you can't destroy it. But if gold's only use is to display wealth, it's a bit like the Kardashians, I suppose. Its only use is to display wealth, to store wealth, to exchange wealth. Its use is money. And that led the historian Peter Bernstein to say, nothing is as useful and as useless at the same time. But as I say, in the same way that we have an instinct for beauty, beautiful things are good for us in some way, ugly things we're repulsed by, they're dangerous, spiders, snakes, sheer drops, loud noises. We have an instinct for gold, and that led Gerald Loeb, the stock market trader from New York, to say the desire for gold is the most universal and deeply rooted commercial instinct of the human race. And I think he's absolutely right when he says that. Because you could take a time machine to any culture, anywhere in the world, at any time in history, and they would know that gold has some kind of value.